Picture the best case story every AI Center of Excellence tells about itself in the first year. Somebody has an idea for an agent. They're gonna bring it to the Center of Excellence. And probably 2 days later, they have a green light, a starter architecture, and a whole team which is gonna cheer for them. No committee meeting that goes nowhere. You don't have a 6-week wait for a decision nobody remembers making. You only get help and fast. Everyone is gonna love this version of the story. And for the first year, it is genuinely true. Which in the most cases is exactly why almost nobody notices what is actually happening underneath it. Because if you move forward and you go 18 months later and ask the same Center of Excellence one very boring question: how many requests has it turned down? The honest answer, more often than you would expect, is none. Zero. Not one. Every idea that walked in the door eventually walked out the other side with a yes. Sometimes maybe slower, sometimes with a few more diagrams attached. But a yes, all the same. And let's be honest here, a function that says yes to every single thing is not actually deciding anything. It is just watching things happen and adding paperwork on the way past. So this is what this episode is actually about. It's not whether you have a Center of Excellence, because almost everyone building with AI at any scale now has one, or something similar to it. What matters is whether the thing you build can say no, and actually mean it. And today, I want to take the whole function apart, piece by piece. The roles, the money, the paperwork, the failure modes. Hey everyone, Petko Petkov here. And if you're new to this channel, the short version of what I do is I take operating functions like this one apart in public. Because after 15 years inside enterprise IT, I have watched and witnessed more Center of Excellence quietly turn into intake desks than I have watched actually say no to something. Every one of these functions is founded on the same generous word. And this word is already working against the one thing the function needs the most. I've already seen this pattern often enough to be able to predict its shape before I even ask what the org chart says. And it always starts the same innocent way. A Center of Excellence gets founded to help the business move faster and safer with AI. And help is the word on the charter. In the kickoff deck, in the first all hands, nobody's gonna stand up in that meeting and it will say the function's real job is to tell actually people no. Well, this is gonna be a very strange way to launch anything. Governance is actually what decides whether it clears the bar in the first place. And the two only look the same from the outside. The difference only shows up the one time a request should not clear the bar. And if there was never a real mechanism for saying so, if the function has spent a year building trust entirely out of being helpful and fast, saying no for the first time would feel like a betrayal. So essentially it doesn't say no. It finds a way to make the request work instead. And everyone in the organization is gonna call this a win. Slowly, without anyone deciding it should happen. The function that was supposed to govern where AI operates is gonna turn into an intake desk with a friendlier name. But watching a function slide into that shape from a distance is not the same as pointing to the one line on its own org chart, which is meant to stop it. And this line is exactly where we go next. So this is layer 1 of 5, and it's governance. The second episode of this series walked the basic shape of a Center of Excellence. Decision rights, a use case gate, autonomy tiers for what an agent is allowed to do on its own. I'm not going to repeat this. What I want to do instead is take the thing apart properly. The way you would take apart an engine rather than just admire the hood. Because Center of Excellence is a job title people put on an org chart. And an org chart cannot tell you whether the function underneath it can actually say no to anything. Start with the single distinction between what it owns and what it merely advises on. Advising, well, it means the function has an opinion. A good opinion backed by real expertise. And the team can take that opinion or leave it, because the actual decision belongs somewhere else. For example, which pattern to build with, when 3 different ones would technically work. How to sequence a roadmap, which prompt structure reads most reliably. This is an advice, and a center of excellence should hand out plenty of it. Owning means something different and much smaller. It means the function holds a decision that cannot be made without it. A verdict the team cannot simply route around, no matter how senior the sponsor is. If every single thing a center of excellence does is technically just advice that a determined team could just ignore, then it doesn't own anything, no matter how many workshops it runs. One of the 6 rights I'm about to name, only one of them is genuinely world-bearing, and most people would guess wrong about which one. In episode 2, I named 6 of these ownership rights specifically. Who approves a use case before it gets built? Who signs off on the production rollout? Who owns the budget? Who owns the risks acceptance when the agent gets something wrong? Who can change the model or the prompts once it is live? And who can change the integrations around it? 6 names on 6 lines. And in a healthy function, each line has an actual person's name next to it. But of the 6, one is load-bearing, and it is the first one. Who approves a use case before it gets built? The other 5 only matter for a use case that already exists. This one is the only point in the entire life cycle where a use case can be stopped before it consumes a single hour of engineering time. And it is also the one most often left as advisory rather than binding. So reviews and recommendations means a team can hear the recommendation, disagree with it, and build the thing anyway. And if this is the actual mechanism sitting behind your use case approval right, you don't have 6 ownership rights. You have 5 of them, and one very well produced opinion. But on the other hand, knowing which right matters is not the same as watching it hold weight once a real request lands on somebody's desk. A team has an idea, and instead of a hallway conversation or a slide deck nobody archives, it goes through an intake form, asking the same handful of questions episode 2 walked through. What is the business value? Is the data underneath it actually ready? How much risk does a mistake carry? How much effort does it take to build? Does it fit actually where the portfolio is trying to go? So this request leaves with one of 3 verdicts written down. Go, pilot with a name guardrail, or park with the one specific thing that has to change before it can come back. What actually determines whether any of this is real? What happens to a park or a no? If a team here park shrug and go and find its own budget and its own contractor to build the thing anyway, with nobody stopping them, the gate, well, that gate is a suggestion box with better branding. The gate only has teeth when getting to production requires something only the center of excellence controls. A shared platform, model access, the audit sign-off a launch needs. So routing around the verdict is not just discouraged, it is impossible. So this is the whole mechanism in one sentence. A no only means something when there is a door behind it that the function actually holds the key to. Now I suggest we put names to this, because the center of excellence is not a person. Keep the group small, 3 to 8, maximum 8 people, and give each one exactly one thing they are personally accountable for. One person leads it and owns the actual refusal. So when a use case gets parked and a sponsor escalates to argue about it. So this is actually the name that has to defend the call in person. Or the function will fault the first time someone senior pushes back. One person who owns intake in triage runs the scoring and keeps the use case register current for every request. not just the ones that got built. Their job is speed and a paper trail, not taste. One person knows the architecture and the shared platform, decides what gets built from a reusable pattern versus what needs something bespoke. This person is on the hook for the pattern library, actually getting used rather than just existing. One person owns risk and controls, assigns the autonomy tier every production agent runs on. And this person is on the hook for nothing going live at a tier nobody actually is assigned. And one person owns enablement, the training, and the documentation that lets a team self-serve the easy requests. Because the fastest way to turn a real gate into a bottleneck is to make every request, trivial or not, wait in the same line as the hard ones. So I want to spend the next few minutes talking about the part almost nobody puts on the org chart and explains more about whether a center of excellence can say no than any other role above it. And this is how the things gets paid for. I want you to picture a function funded the ordinary way most of these start. A slice of a transformation budget, renewed each cycle on how much the business used it, or charged back project by project, so each request arrives with its own small check attached. Think about what that does to the incentive of the 5 people I just named. No matter how good their individual judgment is, every use case they park is a use case that does not get built, which is a line item that doesn't get charged. And this is exactly the number somebody upstairs is looking at when the budget gets renewed next cycle. You have taken 5 capable people and asked them to say no to the thing that pays their own salary, under pressure, with a sponsor in the room, and expect the answer to hold. I can guarantee you it will not hold. Not because anyone involved is weak, but because the incentive was built backwards. A center of excellence that can actually refuse something is funded a completely different way. A standing operating budget, set once at the portfolio level, that doesn't move based on how many individual requests got a yes. It gets renewed against portfolio outcomes instead. The value delivered, risk avoided, incidents that never happened, which means the one time it's gonna say no to something a senior sponsor really wanted, nobody's paycheck will get smaller for saying it. This is not a nicer way to fund the same function. It is the only funding model where refusal is even mechanically possible. So all of this only stays true if 3 documents actually exist, and they are current. Because a center of excellence you cannot audit is just a story people tell about one. The first document is the use case register, and the test for whether it is real is very simple. Does it contain every request that has ever come through intake, including the ones parked or declined, or only the project that shipped? A register with only the winners, it is not a register. It is a highlights reel. And highlights do not stop anything. The second document is the pattern library, the reusable, already vetted building blocks a team should be assembling. New work from inside of reinventing the same integration again. The test here is usage, not existence. A library no one's last 3 production agents were actually built from is being maintained for its own sake. And finally, the third document is the model and agent inventory, a living list of exactly what is running in production right now, who owns it, and which autonomy tier it runs at. If a senior person within the organization asks what is actually live today, and the honest answer would require 3 people and half day to reconstruct, the inventory doesn't exist. So how do you know eventually from the outside that any of this exists? And it actually works, because the metrics a center of excellence chooses to report on itself will tell you almost as much as the artifacts do. Watch from the Vanity set first. Number of workshops delivered, number of pilots launched. A satisfaction score collected from the same teams whose requests it approved. Every single one of those numbers will go up when the function says yes to everything, which should make you suspicious, because the rubber stamp scores beautifully on all three. The actual metrics that mean something point the other way. What percentage of intake requests were declined or parked in the last quarter? And is the written reason still on file? What is the median number of days from a request leading to a verdict? How many production agents currently have a named owner? Check today, not at launch. And how many times a control catch a real problem before a customer or any executive ever saw it? Do you notice the trap hiding inside all of this? If the headline metric of the Center of Excellence is how many requests were approved, you have built the exact incentive this episode warns about directly. Noticing the trap in your own scorecard is not the same as naming the shape your function has already taken. So put a name on the ways this actually breaks. You will recognize at least one of these on site. The ivory tower is the opposite failure from everything I have described so far. Beautiful standards, a gorgeous pattern library, a use case gate that almost never lets anything through. The tail here is a portfolio with plenty of documentation and almost nothing shipped. The bottleneck is different. The gate is real, but it takes so long to get a verdict that the queue behind it is longer than the roadmap it is supposed to be protecting. The tail is a team quietly building outside the process, because waiting cost them the deadline. The rubber stamp is the one this whole episode has been circling around, and it is the most common of the four by a wide margin. The gate exists, the scoring happens, the meetings are being held, and not one request has ever actually been told no. The tail is right there in the register if the request is honest, and it says zero. Zero requests declined in the function's entire history. It was a function that was actually never designing on anything. And the shadow center of excellence is what grows in the gap the other three leave behind. When the real function is too slow or too toothless, teams stop routing requests through it and start routing them through whichever senior engineer can get something built fast. The truth here is real approvals are happening in a direct message the official register will never see. So I want you to picture the common shape of it end to end as one hypothetical, not any single company, but the pattern I described at the start wearing all of its actual parts. A company creates a center of excellence with three people and real good intentions, funded out of a 1-year transformation budget that renews if utilization stays high. There is a gate on paper and an intake form nobody quite remembers to use, because the fastest path to a yes is still a hallway conversation with whoever is friendly. Now, 18 months in, the register technically exists, but it only lists the request that got built. And if you ask it lead how many ideas the function has ever turned down, the honest answer is gonna be none, because saying no in this case was never actually survivable given how the budget renews. Meanwhile, the platform engineer everyone trusts most has become the real intake desk. People send him direct messages because that route is faster than the form. So now the actual governance of the company's AI portfolio now runs through one person's inbox, instead of the function which is supposed to own it. Alright, so in the end, if we have to recap this, a center of excellence that cannot say no is a service desk with a better name. So here is Monday morning, and it costs you honestly nothing. Call it the one decline test. It is checking for one single moment your own function actually said no. Find whatever passes for your intake log right now, even if it is a shared spreadsheet or a channel full of half-finished threads. And please look back across the last quarter for one thing, a request that was actually declined, not delayed, not sent back with a few extra questions. You actually told no with the reason written down next to it. And if you find one, go read that reason, because it will tell you more about whether your governance is real than any org chart could. And on the contrary, if you cannot find a single one, the task for Monday is not to go decline something just to prove a point. It is to write down in a one sentence What would make you say no to the next request that walks in? And this is also precisely the question the governance sections of the free AI Ready Operations Assessment ask about. There is a section about use case gate, scored properly against your own system, rather than my one gut check. Okay, none of this needs a company large enough to have a real line item for a center of excellence. If you are two people or even a single freelancer handing real client work to an agent for the first time, you still need the same two things. An intake, a moment where a new idea has to clear a bar before it gets built. And a gate, a rule that is actually allowed to say no to it. At this size, the intake is a shared document, and the gate might be a single rule you wrote down on account day. Same autonomy, 2 people instead of 8. I want to keep taking functions apart like this, piece by piece, because this format is actually where you get to see what running one looks like. If you want to see whether your own use case gate has any teeth, the free AI Ready Operations Assessment is linked below. It's no more than 10-15 minutes. Just go and fill it out. And if you actually want the anatomy built to run against your own organization, the AI Center of Excellence Handbook is the deeper version of this episode. I'm gonna link this below as well. Every ownership right, every role, every artifact in this episode is still standing on the same floor. Your AI maturity will never exceed your operational maturity. A center of excellence will not just raise the ceiling by existing. It only raises it the moment it is actually allowed to say no. Subscribe if this was useful. I publish one operator breakdown a week. And I'll see you in the next one. If you have lived this one, if you have sat inside a center of excellence that quietly turned into a committee, or watched a real gate soften into a rubber stamp the way I have just described, then please don't be a stranger. Drop me a note in the comments and tell me which failure mode you saw. Remember, don't build better AI, build better operations.